Berryhill, Blakesley, Block, Blumenfield, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Caballero, Calderon, Carter, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Cotto, Davis, De La Torre, De Leon, DeVore, Emerson, Ing, Evans, Fior, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Fuller, Furutani, Gaines, Galgiani, Garrick, Gilmore, Hagman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Lou, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mendoza, Miller, Monning, Nava, Nastande, Nilo, Nilsson, John A. Perez, V. Manuel Perez, Portantino, Ruskin, Salas, Saldana, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Strickland, Swanson, Torlixon, Torres, Tarico, Tran, Valines, Yamada, Madam Speaker.
A quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of chambers and in the gallery to please stand for a prayer. We ask our Assembly Chaplain, Dr. Ivan L. Williams, to offer the day's prayer.
Let us bow our heads for prayer. Eternal Father in heaven, on this day we recognize your supreme will for each of our lives. We know that you desire to give us hope and a future. And so we ask for your power to help us live within your will today, for so often we go astray in our own desires. Give us in these halls an unselfish spirit, a gracious spirit, and a spirit of servanthood. And so we ask that you will bless the families in Haiti with a great sense of your presence. Comfort those who lost loved ones, even entire families, and give that country what may seem impossible, for nothing is too hard for you. We give you our day, and we thank you for being our God. In thy name, amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to now stand and join us in the flag salute. We ask Mr. Nastandi to lead us today. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Wednesday, January 27, 2010. Assembly met at 9:30 a.m. Honorable John A. Pettis.
Mr. Tirico moves. Mr. Nastandi seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentation of petitions, there are none. Introductions and references of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. The absence for today will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Ms. Ma.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to allow Assemblymember Anderson to have guests and photographers on the floor today.
Without objection, the request is granted.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to allow Assemblymember Valines to speak on an adjourn in memory today.
Without objection, the request is granted. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I'm re-referring the following bills to committee. File item Ms. Ma.
Mr. Speaker, at the request of the authors, please send the following bills to the inactive file. File item 13, SB 87, budget.
The clerk will note. Under business on the daily file, the second reading, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1590.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Concurrence and Senate amendments. Pass and retain. Without objection, we'll move to file item 14 for purpose of amendment. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 450 with amendments by Assemblymember Lowenthal.
Ms. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The amendments to Senate Bill 450 replace the current contents of the bill with an urgency measure dealing with school evacuations on Catalina Island. These amendments would allow the Superintendent of Public Instruction to waive class size reduction penalties for Long Beach Unified School District in the event of weather-related closures and the need to move island pupils to mainland classrooms. It's my understanding that this bill will go back to Assembly Education and Appropriation Committees. I ask for your aye vote on the amendments.
Seeing nobody seeking recognition for debate, without objection, we will take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Out to print, back. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I'm referring the following bill to committee. File item 14, SB 450, to Education and Appropriations. Without objection, we'll move to file item 5, Assembly Bill 1178 by Mr. Block for reconsideration. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1178 by Assemblymember Block, an act relating to taxation to take effect immediately, tax levy.
Is there any objection to granting unanimous consent for reconsideration? Seeing none, reconsideration is granted. Objection is noted if late. Mr. Block, you may open on your motion to reconsider.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we heard AB 1178. We had many absences in the House yesterday when that bill was heard. I'm just asking that the bill get a fair hearing today with more members present. It seems appropriate to reconsider so that the House can make a full determination.
Do any other members seek to speak on reconsideration? Seeing none, the clerk will open the roll. This motion requires 41 votes, members. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 All those vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All members 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 vote. Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 42, noes 18. Reconsideration is granted. Mr. Block, are you prepared to take the bill up at this time?
Yes, I am, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1178 by Assemblymember Block, an act relating to taxation to take effect immediately, tax levy.
Mr. Block, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday you heard about AB 1178. You heard about the building in the Cayman Islands that houses 19,000 businesses that do no business there. But that address allows them to avoid paying their fair share of California taxes. You heard about the needs of struggling students and families whose burden could be eased by closing that tax loophole and using the recovered revenue, $120 million per year, to make their lives easier. You heard that the California Labor Federation and the California Professional Firefighters agree that this bill would be good for California's working men and women. And some of you have heard today at the doorway from lobbyists who have dire speculation that California can't afford to pressure bad actors to step up and fulfill their rightful obligations, that it's in our best interest to ignore their schemes and their deceptions and just look away. Some of you will side with these corporate bad actors who stash millions of dollars in the Cayman Islands rather than pay their fair share to California. I stand with the college students and their families, and I urge you to stand with me with your aye vote.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members, I rise once again to support this measure. But let me start by apologizing because I characterized those that take advantage of this loophole as tax cheats, and that's really not fair because they're cheating fair and square. So I wanted to make that distinction. But the fact remains that this practice is something I think that comes to us in the new information age in the 21st century, something that was not anticipated by our laws when they were enacted so many years ago, but it is a very real problem. And I think California's got to do something about it. Now, I don't know if any of you have been following what happened in Oregon. In Oregon, a couple days ago, the electorate voted to tax themselves, but actually didn't vote to tax themselves directly, but voted to tax, among other things, the high profits of the major corporations in the state. And according to political pundits, the most effective ad that helped that measure pass were images of these corporate executives getting out of their limos and going into their private jets. There is a movement in this country that we have got to stand up and listen to, because California is where that starts. California is where we started to see that trend 20 years ago. This is something that we can do to help the people that we all say we care about, not those that are in need, not those who are ill or feeble or elderly, those who are our cousins, our aunts, our relatives, our friends, the people we see every day, Joe the plumber. Joe the plumber. Because if Joe the plumber is wondering whether or not he has the ability anymore to achieve the American dream for his child to be able to get a college education, it's fleeting. But we can at least help We can't control the economy, but we can help. We can take the dollars away from the corporate executives. Maybe they got to fly a prop job instead of a jet. And we can send it over to college students to help pay for their books. This is a no-brainer. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. You can certainly tell that we're approaching a campaign season with some of the amazing arguments made on the floor of this chamber today. We just heard about corporate jets, corporate chieftains living a life of luxury, jetting back and forth and using limos. Of course, at first when I heard this description, I thought that perhaps the Speaker was referring to Madam Speaker of the House of Representatives, who flies back and forth 3,000 miles using a corporate jet or sometimes larger jets. But no, he was actually referring to people in the free market system working for corporations. Now, if you look at what Oregon did a few days ago, raising the tax on corporations, raising the tax on the most productive members of society, I was actually thankful that the voters of Oregon did that because they finally made themselves slightly less competitive versus California. You see, Oregon for years has been in the top 15 states in the nation insofar as their competitiveness in attracting new jobs in business to Oregon. Now, perhaps, we will no longer be hemorrhaging so many jobs north of us to Oregon, like we did with Genentech. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Genentech built somewhere along a $250 million manufacturing facility in Oregon, and they're able to save $6 million a year off of their state taxes because they did that, because they moved capacity out of California. Ladies and gentlemen, this measure is the wrong measure at the wrong time for the wrong reason. California has the 4th highest unemployment rate in America. Will this measure improve it? Of course not. California is hemorrhaging jobs because, according to Forbes magazine, we have the worst combination of taxes and regulatory policies of any state in the union. You know how hard that is to accomplish, ladies and gentlemen of the State Assembly? We are the worst. Worse off than New York, worse off than New Jersey. This is the worst place in the nation to do business because of the policies enacted by the people in this chamber over the years. Will this bill make that better? No, it will not. Ladies and gentlemen, the last objection I have with this bill is that it circumvents Article 13A of the California Constitution. How is that, you might ask? Well, because what this bill does is it increases taxes on some businesses and then cuts taxes in another area, therefore having the fiction of revenue neutrality. In point of fact, what this bill will do is put further pressure on business not to expand in California. Now, do these businesses pay taxes in the state, as was intimated to the opposite by the two previous speakers? Of course they do. They pay all kinds of taxes in the state of California: payroll tax, property tax, sales tax, in addition to myriad fees and other taxes. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not put further pressure, give further reasons and excuses to businesses not to locate in the state of California. I urge a no vote.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I find the rhetoric on this floor really amusing. You know, we are constantly creating a nexus between, like I said yesterday, education, students, and everyone else, and everything else is evil. Now, I understand the power that the education lobby has on this floor. I get it. However, what the kids are going to want, what the parents are going to want, is that their kids have somewhere to work. The purpose of an education is to develop some kind of competency in a skill set so that you can contribute back to society. And I know a lot of kids right now that are going back to school simply because they can't find work. Now, California, you've heard, is the worst in the nation, worst place to do business. This is common knowledge. I mean, it's all over the papers. And with what's going on right now in Washington, D.C., the uncertainty with the taxation, the penalties and everything, does any of you know what's happened to the stock market this week? We dropped 500 points. We're down to the 10,000 market. And that's not helping any of you that might have some portfolio of investment savings, be on money market, or anything else. I mean, you know, our pension plans, CalPERS just lost another, what, 500, was it 500 million? I'm trying to think of how much they just lost in an investment. Everybody's losing money right now on their retirement programs because of all the uncertainty we are creating with the tax system and with who we're going to penalize and who we're going to make the demon next time. It's not good for business. Business and investors and the people of this nation right now need some stability. They need everything to stop. As a matter of fact, if this House closed down for 6 months, it would probably do a heck of a lot to boost California. I have not seen anything come out of here that's going to help us. It just penalizes, and crushes anyone that is of productive society. And we need these working folks, and we need more than just, you know, the state government workers. I heard about the high-speed rail yesterday, and we're hiring people from all over the world to come and work on that. That doesn't help California workers. All the money we're getting, the stimulus dollars we're getting for the transportation, those are going to what is the agency? Caltrans. Okay, so Caltrans is actually hiring people from our private companies down south, and I'm sure many of yours, taking private industry and paying them off the government payroll. Now that's not going to expand that's not going to expand our revenue pie here. We need to find a way to work with private industry. And the worst thing you can do is keep messing with the taxation system or anything else, even a bad system. If you know and you can assess your risks, you can decide whether you're going to invest or not. But all these changes going on in Washington and all the changes being anticipated here, nobody knows what to do. And it is freezing employment, it's freezing out investment, and it's tanking the stock market. That is a good indicator of what all this uncertainty is doing. So I ask you, please just stop for a while. Take a deep breath. Let us get on our feet. This is not going to generate the revenue that you think it will. There's going to be a way around it. And you're killing companies, and you're discouraging everybody from coming to California. And you're hurting the future of our children that we are trying to educate. Thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this resolution. And I have to take exception with my colleagues who are saying that this is bad for business. This bill is good for business. This bill is good for the 99% of businesses that are playing by the rules and not practicing tax evasion. There's a building in the Cayman Islands where there are 19,000 businesses registered. There's only one real business in that building, and that's a law firm. 19,000 businesses are registered here. Mr. Block's bill is not about the Water's Edge election. It's not about the issue of people doing legitimate business overseas. This bill is about tax evasion. This bill is about closing a loophole so that the other businesses that are playing by the rules will be able to compete on a level playing field. So when you say it's bad for business, I want to make it real clear what we're talking about. You're saying it's bad for the 1% of businesses that are evading their taxes. It's not bad for the 99% of businesses who are, by definition, then paying more than their fair share. Now, this practice has been growing in the last several years. The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, estimates there are numerous businesses that are practicing it. In fact, some corporations have dozens or hundreds of tax subsidiaries in these different countries. This is a practice that has got to stop. And the funds can be used for important social purposes. And with that, I rise and ask for your support.
Mr. Gaines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. You know, we don't even really have to have this debate. If we could just pass T-Ridge, we'd raise hundreds of millions of dollars that would help resolve our budget problems here. But I would like to take another look at what happened in Oregon, because if you look at the average tax increase for a corporation in Oregon, did you know that that corporate tax was 10 bucks? It was a $10 corporate tax in Oregon, and they said on average it was going to go up to $157 per corporation in Oregon. So I think maybe we ought to take a look at that model and see how we can incorporate it here in California, because we could drop our taxes dramatically. And I think ultimately what we ought to be looking at is how do we drop or lower the corporate tax here in California to draw businesses back into the state of California. There's a reason why they're going offshore. The level of taxation is too high, it's too onerous. Of course we want them operated out of the state of California, but we can create incentives by lowering that corporate tax rate to bring them back. So I urge a no vote on this. Thank you.
Mr. Ruskin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. This is a very simple bill at a time when the public is fed up with certain interests getting a break they oughtn't have. That's simply what this bill is about. It simply says that if you create a corporate headquarters somewhere outside of California offshore, and you don't really create the business on that island, then you shouldn't be able to say that's where the business is created. This bill does not discriminate against legitimate businesses that open on those islands in those tax havens. It does not discriminate against legitimate businesses that truly raise their revenues there. It simply says that if you raise your revenues in California, you can't get away with not paying taxes simply by setting up a shell corporate structure in a tax haven. It's very simple. People have said on the floor that they are amused about the nexus. Well, you know, this would be good legislation even without the nexus. We shouldn't really be allowing these tax havens to exist anyway. But since it takes 2/3 vote to pass a good law like this, we need to create a nexus so that there's a net revenue effect. And what better net revenue effect to give than to provide more money to people who are trying to get into college, get degrees, get out of college, and get good jobs. Nothing provides good jobs more than a well-educated population, and we face a challenge in that regard now. So I urge an aye vote. As my colleague behind me stated, this is really a no-brainer.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this legislation. First of all, I want to thank the people of Oregon for getting California maybe off of life support, because we're hoping that we'll benefit from their ability to tax people who create wealth. The second thing is that since July of this last year, concerning jobs, we have lost over 85 corporate companies have moved out of California since July 9th. And here's the best part of this story, is many of those jobs were green jobs. And guess what they're doing? They're getting out of here as fast as they can because we're taxing them out of business. And you know what they're doing with the money? You know how they're expanding in Georgia and in Mississippi and Missouri? California green job companies, they're expanding with federal stimulus money. And they're not keeping it in California, they're moving it out. It is called ABC, Anywhere But California. And so what we're going to do today is live up to our reputation as being hostile to business, not allowing businesses and jobs to grow so we can get out of this recession by growing our way out. Last year when this body raised taxes, the day before those taxes were raised, our revenues were down 15%. The day after they were raised, our revenues dropped 30%. This is not the way to do this. We got to put our faith and hope back into the individual and the community that knows how to create wealth. Ladies and gentlemen, the last body on earth that knows how to create wealth is the state of California. So let's give it to the people who know how to get it done. I stand in opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Ms. Brownlee.
Yes, I want to rise in support of this bill. There's been a lot of conversation on this floor about nexus. Well, there is a very natural nexus between the business community and education. As chair of the Education Committee, I have the business community come into my office continually and talk about the importance of investing in human capital and the importance of that investment for the future growth of our economy in California. And when they talk about an investment in human capital, they're talking about an investment in our educational system. And I think that this is a good bill because, in essence, it puts the corporations on notice for their corporate responsibility, and at the same time making a very small investment in the area of human capital by supporting an investment, a small investment in education, so that our kids in California can be educated and be part of that human capital investment. This is a good bill. This is a simple bill. This is the right thing to do for California, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I agree with you guys.
Mr. Huffman. Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have one, perhaps small, but I think important point to add this debate. A cheap shot was made. One of many cheap shots was made in the debate opposing this bill this morning. It was stated that our Speaker is constantly flying back and forth across the country on private corporate jets. Let me just tell you that through the wonders of modern technology, I just got a text from our Speaker. She has just landed on a United commercial flight. She, of course, was at the State of the Union address, but she flew commercial. Now, there are other members, other leaders in the Capitol here that don't do that constantly fly on private jets, and I'm gathering some on this floor might even own a few airplanes, and maybe have been among those who spoke out in defense of the status quo, in defense of tax evasion. But I certainly want to invite folks to keep it to the facts. No cheap shots. Our Speaker landed on a commercial airline.
Mr. Vallines.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just add, I'm not sure. There might have been a confusion. I don't believe that the speaker referred to was our current speaker in California, but actually the nation's speaker. I think that's what that was, and not a cheap shot at our speaker currently now, who we all enjoy. I would just like to add a couple of things. One of my colleagues talked about education. I think education is one of the most important things in California. If I learned anything in 2.5 years as Republican leader traveling up and down the state, it was that corporations always, CEOs always, senior staff always said, please invest more in education. Put it in the UC system. Put it in the CSU system. Put it in places where we can have this innovation. I'm convinced that if we took a big piece of our budget and moved it into the UC research system, we would be better off. But I would say it's because of choices that we can't do that. This bill's not the answer. Let's start with one basic thing. There's a 2/3 protection for taxes in the state of California. Thank goodness. This bill is trying to get around that. That's the wrong thing. But let's talk about how we could fund education, because that's one of the goals mentioned here. First, rainy day. Second, have that rainy day fund and have a spending cap. Then we could start to make those choices in the state where we could say, let's put that money into the UC system for spinoff, for green technology, for solar, for all of it. But we haven't done that. We've let ourselves get to a position where Oregon is going to be that we can't even make choices anymore because we're not managing the House. We need to go back 5 or 6 steps, put a spending cap, pass it. Put a rainy day, pass it. Put more money in education. I guarantee Republican votes would be for here in a second. They would be here for that. But let's not destroy the 2/3 protection. That's a mistake. And let's not mix up the argument. We haven't done our job so we can actually put money where we want. But we could. Those of you that are here in your first term, you've got 5 more years to go. You could be the ones to fix it by putting a cap and a rainy day fund in here like we fought for so many times. And I just want to close with this. I don't know where this place is with 19,000 businesses, but that must be one tall building. Thank you.
Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, you know, I do believe we should build up and not out, and that's probably the metaphor for why we should all be speaking in support of AB 1178. And I want to thank Mr. Block for bringing this forward and to bring this forward again for reconsideration. You know, this is a very simple and straightforward bill, as Mr. Ruskin has already alluded to. It's a bill that's designed to close a loophole, clear and simple, and devote the savings to education. What better way to recoup and close a loophole than to invest in the future of California? You know, those who seek to paint California as the worst place to do business should look at some of the other reports that have come in recently. For example, my seatmate, Mr. Fong, has leaned over to me during this conversation today on the floor to say that we have a variety of businesses in his own district that are posting great gains and showing great success in the stock market, Google and others, eBay and others, and hopefully they're not part of the 19,000 businesses that are registered offshore. But you know, it's not surprising to me that the same party who enjoyed until very recently the opportunity to shelter their yachts in the water to speak against reforming the water's edge discussion that we are now in. Colleagues, I urge you to vote in favor of AB 1178. It's a simple bill, something that we should be all proud to support. And I know, if I may, Mr. Speaker, a quick segue to say that I know that there are constituents of mine watching in the gallery right now, Fairfield senior citizens, who are hoping that we will all do the right thing, or should I say the left thing today, and make sure that we close this loophole. Ladies and gentlemen, let's support AB 1178, and welcome to my friends in the gallery.
Mr. Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, my comments will be brief. I rise in opposition of AB 1178. And some of you, in your free time, please take a journey down to my district, down to the Central Valley. Come and work in some of the food lines and the food banks, where some of the unemployment is 40%, where people are struggling just to feed their kids. Listen to the business owners in my district that are struggling just to make a living. And I appreciate the comment that was made by by this gentleman that is talking about some of his businesses in his district. Come to the Central Valley. Drive down Interstate 5. Look what is happening to our agriculture community in California. Live their nightmare just for one day. People are leaving California, and they are going to the neighboring states, because it is difficult to do business here in California. Taxes, increased taxes, are not the answer. Every one of us on this floor here, we all have checkbooks. We all work to feed our family, to clothe our kids, and to give them an opportunity to succeed, to have an education. But all of us on this floor, I would like to think that every one of us live within our means. We balance our checkbook. But we don't do that in this building. We don't. We do need that spending cap. We do need that rainy day fund. What we don't need is more taxes. I oppose AB 1178. Thank you.
Seeing no further members seeking recognition, Mr. Block, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My friend from the Central Valley makes a compelling argument. Times are bad. I would ask if we think that farmers in the Central Valley are the ones who are using this corporate tax loophole. They are not. Is it our small businesses that are using this corporate tax loophole? They are not. It is the multinational corporations that are abusing our tax code and as a result providing less money for students in the Central Valley, less money for small businesses in the north and the south of California. It is the abuse that has to stop. We talk a lot about closing tax loopholes. People on both sides of the aisle talk about closing tax loopholes. Well, now's your chance. Put up or shut up. Do you want to close these loopholes, or do you want to let businesses continue, huge multinational businesses, continue to use as an excuse that, well, the legislature doesn't seem to care because they're not stepping up. They're not really maintaining the order that our tax code demands. It's really a time for action. We've had plenty of talk, plenty of people defending the status quo. Well, the status quo isn't good enough in California anymore. We need to make changes. We need to make great changes to save our state. And it starts here. It starts by closing loopholes, by supporting our kids in school, by supporting their families, and I strongly urge and request your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Block moves the call. Members, we're returning to motions and resolutions. Mr. Anderson, you are recognized from your desk to introduce your guests.
Mr. Speaker and members, today I'd like to welcome Jeff Cover from La Mesa, California, to the Assembly Chamber. Jeff should be back in the corner here. Jeff served on the community as an educator for 23 years and is the assistant principal to Steel Canyon Charter High School. Jeff spent 8 years on the Cajon Valley Union School District Governing Board as a trustee. Jeff's the proud father of 3 children, Sarah, Andrew, Brandon, and his wife Annette. His son Andrew interned in my office and was a phenomenal intern. And I'd just like to welcome from my district here on the Assembly floor.
Welcome. Continuing under motions and resolutions, Ms. Saldana, you're recognized for your announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a reminder, members, that next Thursday is the Americans Heart Association Go Red campaign kickoff. And I'm encouraging all members to please wear red in honor of that day. I see many gentlemen already wearing red ties. That would be perfect. heart attack and stroke are two of the leading causes of death and disability in the United States. Cardiovascular disease claims over 455,000 American lives, and those are women who are dying from this in very high numbers. And I'm sure you're all aware that in recent days we have had members of our own legislative body and our staff suffer strokes, suffer heart attacks. So this is a very difficult disease for people to understand, and an awareness campaign is very important so that people will have an assessment done, see what their risk factors are, and then take necessary action. The Women's Caucus has sponsored the 5th annual Go Red at the Capitol event so that all of us will have the knowledge we need to be safer and healthier. I encourage you, please, as part of this campaign, to wear red next Thursday. There will be free screenings in room 125 starting in the morning, and I encourage you and your staff to please take advantage of those screenings right here in the building. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Members, we're now moving to our consent calendar. We're at the second-day consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the second-day consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 674 by Assemblymember Salas, an act relating to criminal procedure.
Clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 69, noes 0.
And Assembly Bill 1155.
Ayes 69, noes 0. Members, we're lifting the call on file item 5. The clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 41, noes 28. The measure passes. In reviewing the daily file, I see no other items that members have prepared to present. Do any members have any other items that they are prepared to present at this moment? This concludes the business on the daily file. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. Except for motions to reconsider, all motions shall be continued. Announcements. The session schedule is as follows. Friday, January 29th, no floor session, no check-in session. Monday, February 1st, floor session at 11 a.m. Again, members, floor session on Monday is 11 a.m. That's 1 hour prior to our normal start time. Request to adjourn in memory. Mr. Valines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise regretfully. Paulmina or Pauline Bonadelli, a friend of Fresno for many, many years and a family that's been just big, significant contributors to the betterment of our community for years, passed away on Monday. She was a first-generation daughter of Italian immigrants who loved the Fresno area because it reminded them of back home, and the agriculture drew them to the region. Paulina married a local home builder, John Bonadelli, at the Carmel Mission in 1952. Her community involvement was extensive, including St. Agnes Medical Center, the Nazareth House, St. Anthony of Padua Church, many other things she loved to do, but she loved to cook, serve delicious dinners for her family, and anyone sitting at her kitchen table always knew that that was her favorite pastime. They raised 3 children who are community leaders now in Fresno, Karen, Paula, and John, all followed in the business of the family, which was building homes and putting people into that dream of a home in a nice neighborhood and a great neighborhood, mostly in Clovis, all over the place. It was sad to see that. She had been sick for a little while. She's in a better place. We'll miss her in Fresno. The family continues on, and I just thank you for letting me rise in recognition of that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Valines. Please bring the name forward to the desk if you would. The remaining request to adjourn in memory will be deemed read and printed in the Daily Journal. I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Ma moves, Mr. Hagman seconds, that the House stands adjourned until Monday, February 1st at 11 a.m. The quorum call is lifted.
So Sam, does he want to do